Hello everybody and welcome back to another super exciting episode of Kicking It with the Queen of England. So on today's episode, yes, we're talking Porsches again. My Porsche 911's engine is completely back up in it. As you can see, we have completed the winter project of replacing the timing chain guides along with so many other while you're in there items. So the engine has been back up in it for a while now. It's actually been back up since December of 2021. I have had this car back out on the road and I've put a couple hundred miles on the car since getting the engine back up in it. Good news is it runs fantastically. Everything is all good there. No issues with regards to how it operates, etc. However, as one might expect, when you remove the engine, you are disconnecting a lot of things and you're repositioning things and getting it all reassembled. Maybe not always does it go perfectly, right? So I did encounter a couple issues, and in this video, I'm going to talk about that, the issues that I encountered, and we're going to fix one of them today. We did encounter a couple little issues in the form of fluid leaks. First one that I noticed was a coolant leak, and when we come under the engine here, let's see, I'll orient you guys this way. So front of the car is that way, of course, rear is this way. So there are a couple of main coolant lines here that come into the back of the engine. First one, or the most rearward one, goes into the water pump, which is this line here. Now it also has a T-joint here and then another T-joint up inside the engine room up there. The other one is this one. Yep, there it is. It comes out of the thermostat housing and basically makes its way all the way up to the front of the car to the radiators. So I found out after my first actual long drive with this car, when I pulled into a parking spot, I saw some coolant dripping out of the bottom of the car. Just a little drip, but it was consistent. And I'm like, okay, obviously something's up. So I got underneath it and I checked and realized that this hose here, the one that comes out of the water pump, had a pinhole leak in it. At first I couldn't tell, so I thought actually maybe it was just a loose hose clamp. So I tightened the hose clamps back down. However, it was still leaking. Very frustrating. I discovered that in the process of taking this hose off, I must have been a little bit too rough with it, with the pliers, because I kind of take the approach of, I use pliers and I kind of like unseat the hose from whatever it's connected to. I don't love the approach of taking like a pick and wedging it in there. I feel like you're just asking to puncture the hose doing that, and I have had very little luck doing it. It's a lot of work. So I usually will take big pliers, wrap them in tape so that you don't have just the teeth grabbing onto the hose, and then I'll grab the hose and rotate it. That way it kind of unseats the rubber from the metal or whatever it's grabbing onto. It's usually a pretty successful approach. However, inherently you are gripping down on the hose with pliers, and so in this case I must have put a little bit too much pressure on the hose and created a pinhole leak for myself. Long story short, I already have actually replaced this hose, and I didn't make any footage of that because quite honestly it wasn't the most exciting thing in the world. And as you might know from my previous videos, I hate anything having to do with coolant. And I had to re-drain the coolant out so that I didn't shower myself even more than I was already going to with coolant when I pulled this line. Anyway, long story short, new line is up in there and it doesn't leak anymore, so that's good. On the note of that line, actually this is the one that came out of it. So you can see here there's a T-joint up at the top here. This is the one that's actually in the engine room portion. This connects to the line that goes back to the air oil separator on the front of the engine, and then this is the part that goes to the metal line, and then this is the part that comes out of the water pump. And you can see here, when you look really closely, there's my pinhole, and it was on the top, actually the top of the hose. Basically, it wasn't leaking when the entire system was not under pressure. Obviously, when you run the car, the coolant system pressurizes significantly because the coolant is very hot. And it would only show itself when the coolant system was actually pressurized. Anyway, we got that all fixed. No more coolant leaks. Awesome. The next issue that I encountered actually was a small oil leak. And so, as one might imagine, we of course took the valve covers off. We resealed the valve covers because they don't use gaskets. You have to use the Loctite 5900, I think it is. Yes, confirmed. Loctite 5900, this stuff. This is the actual Porsche gasket maker that you use in a lot of applications actually throughout this entire engine. But in the case of the valve covers, it is what seals it completely. There is no gasket. I tried to replace as many of the old O-rings and gaskets, etc., along the way that I could, but I didn't replace everything. And so turns out that kind of ended up biting me in the butt. You look in here, here's the valve cover, and then there are these spark plug tubes. This tube seals off the area, basically the oil that's flowing around the valve train behind this valve cover. So it just kind of makes a sealed tunnel between ambient here and the spark plug in there, which is physically, again, connected to the cylinder head. So you can see I have, in the process of diagnosing this leak, which you can see the oil residue all along the valve cover here and here, and it was actually creating a drip and then dropping straight onto the exhaust. Not ideal. I did see a couple little plumes of smoke out the back as a result of oil burning off the exhaust, dripping off this. So that was cool. But anyway, I have already taken the coil packs out in the process of diagnosing this issue. I will pull this out and show you guys what this looks like. So, I'm gonna set this aside for 2 seconds here. To give you a better idea of what I mean, again, behind there it's completely open, and it's just valves and cams. So these tubes are what seal off the oil that's floating around the entire cylinder head from the outside world. Now, the issue, again, aging rubbers and plastics, is that I reused these somewhat ignorantly. I probably should have just gone ahead and replaced them from the get-go. I didn't. But you can see here the main rubber gasket should be very round, and it is very much not. It's flattened, and then there's also an internal seal here that seals, and it's harder to see because it's actually black. It seals closer to where the spark plug sits. It also is flattened. So that means that I probably shouldn't have reused these, and admittedly I could tell that they were flattened, but I decided to reuse them anyway because I wasn't having any leaks from them previously. So here's where we are currently. I have ordered some replacement ones, and I've actually ordered 3 replacement ones. Reason being, I probably should have just ordered 6 because they're cheap, but I also figure I only have 2 leaking ones currently, and I don't know. In this case, let's just leave well enough alone. So I will replace the 2 that are leaking. Nice. And then I also have a backup for if and when another one ever starts to leak. You can very clearly see when we compare the gasket roundness of the old one versus the new one that the old ones were very crushed down and probably weren't offering that much sealing anymore in their advanced age. And maybe it looks like there might be a new design for this gasket. As you can see, again, this gasket is very crushed, very square looking. This one is nice and round. Don't know why they changed the color. Maybe it's a different material. I don't know. But anyway, so we've got some new ones on hand to replace those and solve that leak, hopefully. So let's go ahead and put these guys back up in the car, and then we'll put our coil packs back in, and we should be able to have that leak all finished and tidied up.